week. Tonight at 7, we want to continue the conversation that we've been having all week about racism, police brutality, and what needs to change and how to get there. Tonight, we're joined by Mayor of Portland, Ted Wheeler, and soon we hope to be joined by Pastor Matt Hennessy, who works with the city on race relations. We hope to talk about your collaboration in just a few minutes, but first, let's start with Mayor Wheeler. Mayor Wheeler, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's been a very busy week. But let's talk about some of the changes that you promised this week. I know that former President Obama called on mayors across the country to sign a pledge committing to reviewing police use of force policy, and I know you signed that pledge. When are you planning to start this, and will you include input from communities of color?
Yes, absolutely. I was very proud to join mayors from all over the country yesterday in signing former President Obama's pledge. The pledge is simple. Sorry, it's 7 p.m., so my neighbors are out thanking frontline
That's
folks.
Right.
But the pledge is a simple one, and first and foremost, it's a commitment to address use of force policies, and we will certainly do that in the city of Portland. It also requires us to engage community, report out on our results, and then take specific steps and actions to change and reform our policies around use of force.
And this is something I wanted to talk to you about. Earlier today, I know you removed school resource officers from Portland Public School, Park Rose, and David Douglas School District. So tell me about that. What made you decide to do this, and who will now be in charge of protecting kids?
Yes, well, first of all, our community has spoken. Mm-hmm. And they've said quite clearly it's time to redirect dollars that would otherwise go towards putting officers in schools to programs that help our Black children to grow and thrive. And I made a commitment to listen and to act. And this week it was abundantly clear that the first step we needed to take that could be done immediately was this. So we acted urgently and we acted swiftly. And of course, this is also being done in concert with the school districts in the Portland area. And in terms of who will continue this work, it's obviously going to continue to be law enforcement. Mm-hmm. And we have already discussed ways that we can adapt to this changing circumstance. But this was a very important issue that was raised by the community. It was seen as an important value by the community. And we've heard the community and we've acted.
What are you hearing from police officers? I mean, have they been reflecting, this last week?
Oh, absolutely. The police officers themselves have had many opportunities to interact with the demonstrators. We've seen the demonstrators and the police officers actually engage. We've heard from police officers who've been involved in meaningful conversations with Black Portlanders who are coming forward to engage in dialogue with police. But those voices, in some cases, are being drowned out by others who come to commit acts of vandalism, but those are small people, and the police understand that there's a larger discussion here. And I've been really proud of the way the Police Bureau has engaged. They took a knee in support of and out of respect for the demonstrators. The other day, we saw our police chief meet with some of the young leaders of the demonstration and hear their concerns, and that led to other meetings and other interactions. And on the whole, it's been very encouraging to see peaceful demonstrators distance themselves from those limited number of people who are violating the law because it takes away from their important message. And so on the whole, I think it's been a very good experience for our frontline police officers.
When it comes to protests, I know you've seen a lot of protests in Portland, during your time as mayor. Do these feel different to you? And if so, how?
Oh, absolutely. I've seen a lot of protests, but I've never seen anything like this. This is a movement that's bringing our communities together in ways that I've never seen before. And from my perspective, just observing it seems like each and every day, the protests are becoming more peaceful and they're becoming more powerful. And they're continuing to attract thousands and thousands of people. And it's my understanding that's the case again this evening. It was really moving just the other night to see 10,000 people gathered in Pioneer Square to build community and build momentum for change. And what's obvious as well, when you look at all the people coming to the streets, these crowds span race, they span age, they span gender. People who look very different from each other and come from different lived experience are finding common ground. And that common ground is around demanding accountability. And I'm glad, because frankly, this city and this nation need to dismantle the systems that have hurt Black communities. And this is the beginning, I believe, of something very positive.
Mayor, as you were talking, we were showing a live picture of some of the protests, and it seems to be, thousands of people again. This is video of the protests from last night, but we were seeing a live picture, and it seemed to be thousands of people again taking to the streets. Before you go, what has been your biggest takeaway as you've listened to community leaders this past week about what needs to change?
Well, the first thing that needs to change is exactly that: listening. Government leaders spend an awful lot of time talking and not enough time listening to Black voices. Going forward, we'll learn from the Black community. We'll hold ourselves accountable for acting on their ideas. And as for the substance of the conversations, I'm hearing that if we really want to change the outcomes, we need to change the policies, the plans, and the culture that created those outcomes in the first place. Some of those things are going to take time. On other things, we can move more quickly, like the school resource officers, with the commitment I made today to invest heavily in the support and education of young Black children in our school. And we're going to continue to look for great ideas like that going forward.
Mayor Wheeler, thank you so much for your time and for talking with us tonight.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And when we
There's
come back,
a hope in the Lord.
When we come back, we hope
And it was
to
loosed
talk
up
to Pastor
on,
J.W.
the
Hennessy,
net.
who works with the city on race relations, and we'll leave you now with a live look at some of the protests happening in Portland. Back. We are continuing our community conversation here at 7 o'clock. I want to bring in Pastor J.W. Matt Hennessy, who works with the city of Portland on race relations. And Pastor Hennessy, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
What a joy to be here, and thank you for the invitation, and also to your listening audience. We're really grateful to be here.
You had been working with the city on race relations prior to this. Did those discussions include the Portland Police Bureau, and what can you share?
Yes, I can share that right after Ferguson occurred, we gathered together as a group of faith leader, community people, business people, and the police themselves, the leadership of the Police Bureau, to bring together the Interfaith Peace and Action Collaborative. And it really has spent 4 years building trust, giving input about policies, procedures, the things that are important for how Portland wishes to police in the future. So it's been very, very helpful, and our chiefs have been extremely supportive, as has their command staff and people on the ground.
What is your impression of training within the Bureau when it comes to matters of race? Is it adequate?
I would guess, and I'm going to say something that people may not particularly care for, and that is that, generally speaking, often training when it comes to race relationships are difficult. I think they're as difficult in the Police Bureau as they are in many other places, because Caucasian people tend to get very defensive overall, not everybody, but many, and therefore it makes it difficult to train and to develop the ability for people to have tools to go forth. So is training? Yes. Do we need more effective training? The answer is still yes.
Mm-hmm. What is your advice? We've heard from a lot of Black leaders this week, and we've asked the $1 million question. How do we move forward? What is your advice to the city about moving forward with actual realistic change?
Some of this is recognizing that America, the country I should say that we live in, is a country that has been built on race and pushing people down. What we have to do is begin recognizing that, number one, we have unfinished business, It's business that this nation started. This city needs to recognize that a conversation about race is great, but really working towards implementation is important. And we as a community need to be willing to be open enough and honest enough to work together on what we don't get along or don't understand and how we want to build a new narrative. We got to be proximate. We've got to work together. We've got to be uncomfortable, and we've got to bring forward change together.
All right, Pastor Hennessy, thank you so much again for your time and for your insight.
Thank you. Good to be here.
My hope for America moving forward is that we use this symbolic time when a nation stops and pauses to mourn the heinous death of Mr. Floyd and say, it's time to come together. Let's not do this over and over again.
Stay connected during breaking news with the KGW app.
And welcome back. Let's continue our conversation with some perspectives from Black teachers in Portland. We've spent the entire school year inside Woodlawn Elementary School, telling stories about race in schools and gentrification. Let's listen now to what some of the Woodlawn teachers have to say about George Floyd and what's going on in our country right now. Woodlawn teachers Lionel Clegg in first grade.
I have two over here.
Anthony Lowry, also in first grade.
All right, let's see what we got.
And Jai Blair in fourth grade.
And the first character that we're going to read about is Peter.
Have never shied away from talking to their students about racism. Finally, everyone else is talking about it too.
Last week has just been, or this whole week has just been very hard to deal with in general. Watching what our whole nation, not just the nation, the world is actually experiencing. I'm still even surprised that it took them as long as it did for even the first officer to be arrested. And I just really don't know what it's going to take. We see this year in, year out with different deaths, and police officers are exonerated. Enough is enough. I'm just tired.
Right. You said you kept thinking about...
Yeah. Comes to mind for me is Fannie Lou Hamer, civil rights activist, that said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired.
We are sick and tired of being sick and tired.
It was over 50 years ago, and I'm in that same place now, as well as many, not just African Americans, but just many people in general, tired of this and tired of having to have the conversation. I really, growing up, would see my parents would look at things that happened during the times my parents were growing up, during the times of civil rights and even times before that. And as a child, as I was growing up, I just imagined I couldn't have lived during those times. I would have thought I would have been killed because I would be outspoken or something to that effect. And I look at those times, but there's nothing different from the civil rights movement to now. The only difference is we're actually having these things put on video.
So it just kind of stirs up, it's just one of those things, just stirs up a lot of memories where, I could have been that person, or my son could be that person, or, a neighbor or somebody really close to me, There's been a couple incidents, but one that really stands out happened right over here at Woodlawn Park, believe it or not. I was probably in my early 20s, mid-20s, and a cop came over the hill and approached me when I was standing outside and asked me what I was drinking. And I told him I'm drinking, it was juice or Kool-Aid or something, and he thought I was being smart. And he slapped the cup out of my hand, put me in handcuffs, threw me in the back of the car. I had a friend with me I was talking to. He threw her in the back of the car, and he took me down to the station. And I was literally incarcerated for, 4 to 5 hours before they released me. He kicked me in the chest, and,
For nothing.
For nothing.
Yeah.
Jai Blair saw himself in Christian Cooper, the African-American birdwatcher in Central Park who asked Amy Cooper, a white woman, to put her dog on a leash.
That is traumatizing. When you're getting called those names and using the police as a force, and you know that, and you're using that to your advantage, that's the scary part, right? That's what makes us fearful of police and everything else, knowing that if that wasn't videotaped, if the cops did come and she said those things, who was going to be protected in that moment? And that's a question that we all need to ask ourselves.
And that really hit you?
Yeah. Because that's kind of every single day of my life is the lens that somebody sees me as is negative first, and that will harm them first. Even though if you ask a lot of people, I'm a pretty nice guy.
Something I talk about with my students is the idea of covert versus overt racism. But I look at a lot of the things that I feel as a person of color going into a store and being looked at and being followed. The way that, again, sometimes women may clutch their purse or go across the street instead of walking on the same side of the sidewalk as me.
You know what? You have to, as a black man, you have to kind of live with kind of you got to live with some toughness. You can't let every little thing bother you, so you kind of live kind of numb to some things just because, because they occur so often.
So I feel a lot more of the discrimination that I've had against me has been more covert compared to overt, but I've definitely experienced my run of the name calling and other things as well.
Lionel Clegg talks to his students about all of this, race, Black Lives Matter, and what's happening in the world.
It's my job. Again, like I just said, I'm building up the next generation. I'm building up the next people that are going to be our leaders. So if I'm not instilling in them some difference, then I'm really losing an opportunity to help change the future.
You talk a lot about these issues, and you never shy away from it. But do you get sick and tired of having to teach white people about this?
I consider myself an agent of change. And so although I'm tired at times, I feel it's my obligation if no one else is going to do it. I talked to you on the side about the idea of someone that's not racist versus someone that's an anti-racist. In this day and age, someone that's not racist isn't going to cut it. That's not going to be the status quo anymore. You either have to choose a side because you're being complacent and not doing something. Even though you may not agree with the tenets of racism, you still have an obligation when you see things happening to step up and say something. And that goes for all people. And so I'm at the point that, again, we can't stand by idly without saying something. It's all of our obligation at this point to step up and say things that are injustices across the board.
And thank you to the teachers of Woodlawn for always being so open to having these conversations. All right, let's listen now to Portland NAACP President, Reverend E.D. Mondane, as we take another live look at the protests in Portland.
Everybody has a right to live. Everybody has a right to be free. Everybody has a right to access. And I think that this is a dawning of a new day.
I see viral stories that say wearing face masks can lead to poisoning. Can you verify?
Verify. It's how KGW separates fact from fiction. You ask the questions, Verify will do the digging with full transparency. The CDC told us carbon dioxide can build up, but not to any dangerous levels and not in cloth masks. Jen, bottom line, poisoning is a false claim. Exclusive Verify reports on KGW. If you walk through the heart of downtown Portland, you'll see this mural, and it's honoring the life of George Floyd. An artist painted it on the boarded up windows of the Apple store after they were smashed during the protests. Emma Berger said she walked by the store and thought the black pieces of plywood could be used as a canvas. She didn't have any plan in place, but just began painting George Floyd's face. Then she added the words he said with a knee pressed into his neck, "I can't breathe."
It's such an important cause, and everyone has to protest in the best way they can.
And I just think it's beautiful, just being able to express oneself through art and being able to have a place where people can come express their feelings.
The mural has grown now into a memorial for George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, and many more who've lost their lives to racism and police brutality. And thank you so much for joining us for this important conversation tonight. And we want to keep the conversation going by listening to the Black community about racism, policing, and really what needs to change. We're going to leave you now with some more from Reverend Mondane as we take another live look at the protests happening right now in downtown Portland.
There's a hope in America, and it was loosed up on the neck of George Floyd. Echoing the sentiments of our brother Martin, there's a new unsettling force that has been loosed upon the shores of America. And it's not just about civil rights anymore, it's about human rights.
You say the customers make their own rules.